Hello and welcome to Uncommon Law, my podcast about true stories from my life experience of over 50 years as a lawyer and trial judge. This is a look at the law from the inside out, stuff they don't teach in law school. This is Judge Rudy Greco, retired Justice of the New York State Supreme Court. In my law practice, I was blessed, and in my life, I was blessed. I had great fortune to have good teachers and to be taught very good lessons early on in life. My first teachers were my parents. My dad was Rudy Sr., and my father was a working man. He retired as a longshoreman, but he had been a plasterer. In the garment district, he had been a cutter, and he had been a liquor salesman, among other things. My mother was a housewife who, as a young woman, sold hats at department stores in downtown Brooklyn, and later on became very, very involved in charity work and political activities. And they taught me some valuable principles they passed on. And one of them was from my father, who used to say, don't ever, first of all, get educated. Get an education. He said, nobody can take your education away from you. They can take your family, your wife, the shirt on your back, your car, your house, but nobody could ever take that education which is in your mind and on your record. And he said, it's like a good union card. He said, it goes around the world and it works. You'll find doors open. And he was absolutely right. He was a very well-read guy. He wasn't educated beyond high school, but he was a very well-read guy, and he revered education and its importance. And he also told me, don't ever confuse education with intelligence. They're two different things. There are a lot of educated people who are not particularly intelligent, and there are many intelligent people who are not well-educated, but they have great native intelligence. The other thing my parents taught me, that some poor people were very, very noble people, and some very, very rich people were really peasants at heart, and you had to judge them as they came along. They also taught me about hospitality and how if a poor man gave you a glass of water and that's all he had, but he did it with all his heart, that was far better than a rich man who just casually invited you to a banquet and didn't care one way or the other. I also, as a little kid, I knew all the politicians and who the office holders. I knew President Roosevelt was in the White House, and Governor Dewey was in the State House. And I asked Dad, what's the difference between Democrats and Republicans, and what are we? He said, we're Democrats. I said, why are we Democrats? He said, well, because of the difference. I said, what's that? He said, well, if a Democrat and a Republican are walking down the street, and each one is carrying a loaf of bread, and they come upon a hungry man, a poor guy who needs some food, more than likely the Democrat is the one that's going to share his loaf of bread. That's why we're Democrats. And they also taught me, very importantly, instilled this in me, that there are only two kinds of people, good people and otherwise. And you have to judge everybody as they come along. Our own people, Italian-American extraction, et cetera, had plenty of bad people and plenty of good people. And everybody else, no matter what their race, color, religion, ethnicity, were the same. There were good ones or there were other ones. And you have to judge them by the way they deal with you and the way you deal with them. Another teacher I had was my legal mentor, a man named William W. Weinstock, whom I used to call Uncle Willie. And Bill Weinstock was the executive director of the Queens County Bar Association and the head of the grievance committee. And he got me started as a law clerk. And Bill got polio. He died in his 80s, in his mid-80s. And he got polio. We contracted it when he was 5 years old, and he lived on braces. And if you spoke to Bill, he found out you were handicapped. He did nothing but smile. And he taught me a lot about being a lawyer. Some very, very important things, including the value of honesty. He said, look, I'm no more or less honest than anybody else. He said, but no one has met my price at this point in time. And my price includes the loss of my good name, the time I'm going to spend in jail, the disgrace I'm going to bring on my family, the stigma that I have to carry the rest of my life, losing my license. He says, all of those things add up, and it's a small fortune, and nobody has ever offered me enough money to trade that in. He says, and you got to keep that in mind, and that's how you do your calculus. And that was a good lesson. He also taught me, as a lawyer, he said, do what good lawyers do. Listen to your stomach. We all have good instincts. If your stomach tells you a situation is bad, you don't need a picture. It's bad. Learn to trust your instincts. They're very good, and we need them for survival, and lawyers need them just as much, if not more, than anybody else. If something in your stomach says something is no good, you don't need a picture. It's no good. Move on. The other thing he taught me, which was quite important, was that lawyers, judges, legislators, government officials, whatever their position was, none of them are perfect. They're just people. They all put their pants on one leg at a time, and they all have limitations. We hope that their limitations are small and that they do the best that they can. But nobody is perfect, and you can't expect perfection from these people. And to do otherwise is just kidding yourself. And that's a good way to keep things in perspective. Two more teachers that I had were a husband and wife that I clerked for, two lawyers, Bernard M. Iber and Geraldine T. Iber. Bernie and Jerry were like my Yiddish mama and papa. Bernie started his own insurance company and became a teacher of tax and state law. And Jerry became a criminal lawyer and a trial lawyer and the first woman appellate division lawyer in New York State. And I was lucky to start by virtue of an introduction from Bill Weinstock and a recommendation. They hired me as their law clerk. And it was a great way to start. And they taught me first and foremost that integrity counts. You can't replace integrity. Always guard your integrity and keep a high standard for yourself. They also taught me the importance of having good friends and a good reputation, because in the legal community, like most other communities, it's a small world and your reputation follows you everywhere. And it's always good if you have a friendly welcome wherever you go and a warm welcome because you have a good reputation. And the other thing I learned from them was to work hard on your weaknesses. Don't just work on what you like, the subjects or the branches of the law, especially when you're studying for exams and stuff like that. Work on your weaknesses. Same thing with your cases. Look at for the weaknesses and get those things mastered and make them strengths. And that is very, very good advice. Last from them, and most important, was always help those in need. They never turned their back on anybody in need. Money wasn't the point. They never forgot where they came from, and the fact that people in need and lawyers have a great ability to help people in need and not to forget it. Another one of my teachers was a gentleman named Samuel S. Baranow. Sam was a trial lawyer, a very hard-bitten defense lawyer. He would defend insurance companies in personal injury matters in Nassau County, big trials. From Sam, I learned that appearance counts. He was always sharp. He was always dapper. And he said, look, people treat you according to the way you look. If you want to test yourself out, show up in your jeans and your T-shirt and walk around a courthouse. And then come back with your suit on and a tie and look nice and see how you're treated and how differently you're treated in both those instances. And he said, on top of that, when you represent clients, you're a reflection of your clients, and they want to be proud of the lawyer that's representing them, and you want to look good. And it matters, he said. It matters a lot. Also, maybe even more important than that, was he kept up with the advance sheets that came out with all the new cases and decisions and the new statutes and interpretations, even into his mid-70s when he retired. And when he died, he was always reading the advance sheets, and he knew the law. He was up to date at all times and never at a loss for anything that came along. And that kept him, at least in a legal standpoint, a very young outlook. And another time, I think I learned a lesson from Sam because I was happy. I had obtained a judgment in a case I was working on for him. I said, Sam, look at this. I got a judgment. And he clapped his hands like in mock appreciation. Ah, wonderful. He says, you got a judgment. This isn't law school. Big deal. You got a judgment. This is not the end of the case. How are you going to collect on that judgment? Try and collect on that judgment. Now we'll see what kind of a lawyer you are, because judgments are easy to get. Collecting on judgments, well, that separates the men from the boys in this profession. So go out and let's see what you can do, and don't forget that. And which was also a very, very valuable piece of instruction. Another teacher I had was an outstanding criminal lawyer and who became a criminal court judge and was outstanding. Is Bill Earlbaum. Bill Earlbaum was one of the best appellate lawyers I had ever come across in my life. And he taught me the value of a very simple proposition. Your pleadings, all your papers for motions and anything else should be in plain English, short and direct. Nothing long. Don't waste words. Don't put ambiguous things in there. Make everything as direct and as short as you can. Judges appreciate it, and you make your point. Be brief and to the point. The second thing he said was really important, and that is you have to live within your means. Lawyers get in trouble when they live beyond their means and they have bills to pay for big boats or big houses that they can't afford or college educations for too many kids, and then they have to take things that they don't necessarily want to take in the way of cases. He said, you want to preserve your freedom so that if you live within your means, there's no financial compulsion to take undesirable matters. You always have the freedom to say, I don't want the case, thank you, but that's not for me. And he says, and that's very, very important. Don't get yourself in trouble like some lawyers do. The other thing he said is as you go along, in the beginning you take everything that comes your way. But as you go along, you graduate and you get you'll have people coming to you by dint of reputation and word of mouth. Don't take too many cases. Learn to say no and weed your cases out so that you take better and better cases, but fewer cases and more rewarding cases, and you'll stay out of trouble that way. And a minor thing, which isn't minor, actually, it's a very, very important thing that I learned from Bill Ehrbaum. He said, Rudy, don't ever go home from the office without answering all the calls and all the mail you got that day. Never leave until everything has been responded to. People expect an answer, and lawyers get in trouble when they don't communicate with their clients. So answer all the calls, take care of all the business, and start every day fresh without the burden of what happened on the day before. He says, and you'll do a lot good. And on a more humorous, or in a more humorous vein, I learned some lessons from a guy named Mel Lebetkin, who was a criminal defense lawyer, who was the model for Jimmy Breslin's character that he wrote about in his columns all the time in the daily newspapers, called Klein the Lawyer. Klein the Lawyer was really Mel Lebetkin, and I would meet Mel in the morning, and he was a little bit of a guy, but he had a very deep, froggy, foghorn kind of a voice. And I would say, in criminal court, I would see him in the hallway, and I go, Mel, we had a regular routine. Are you looking for justice? And he would go, yeah, and if you want to find it, it's under J in the dictionary. And then next day I would say, Mel, are you looking for justice? And he would go, yeah, justice is when you lose the case and your client pays you in full anyway. Or on another occasion, I said, Mel, are you looking for justice? He goes, yeah, and rest assured, if we get it, we're appealing. And Mel taught me a couple of other things that were very, very important, and especially in the practice of criminal law, and it's the upfront doctrine. Get paid up front, because when the case is over, all right, these guys have a ton of other problems that take precedence, and paying you gets shuffled to the bottom of the list. So make sure you get paid up front. And he said, remember the golden rule, the presumption of innocence attaches upon payment of the fee. Don't ever forget that. And tell your clients, which is a hard way to look at it, but it's actually very, very true, because the law practice, especially criminal law practice, is filled with people who didn't get paid, after the case was over, and no matter what the outcome was, and no matter how good they worked. So that's a good thing to learn. It's a very practical point. Looking back in retrospect, after 33 and a half years in law practice, in private practice, there are three distinct advantages overall in being a lawyer and practicing law. First is that the practice of law opens all kinds of doors. Law touches upon every aspect of our existence. If you like music and you want to be a music lawyer, you can do it. If you want to be an aviation lawyer, you can do it. You want to be a maritime lawyer, yes. Sports lawyer, criminal lawyer, commercial lawyer, stock lawyer, anything you want to do, construction lawyer. Every field requires lawyers, and becoming a lawyer, passing the bar exam, opens the possibility for you to practice in an area that you really, really like and captures your interest. The second thing is that the practice of law involves variety, and for a person like myself, variety is very important. I can't deal with tedium. I don't handle it very, very well, or repetition. Now, even if you're a criminal lawyer, let's say, and you do criminal cases all the time, there's still variety because the people, the persons, and the characters that you deal with change, as well as the facts. So there's always something different going on, and something new to learn, or some new twist, even some new bottom of the barrel, if that's the case. But the variety is constant, and that's a great advantage of practicing law. And the last one is something a lot of people don't realize, but the law is very kind to aging. Unlike sports or show business where you can age out of your usefulness, the older you get, if you keep learning and accruing wisdom, the older you get in the law, the more valuable is your advice and your wisdom that you've accumulated. And it's a as a profession, it's very, very kind to aging if you do it right. And there's no heavy lifting, it's not physical. It's mental and intellectual, and it's a great way to go through life and into your old age. So I recommend the law to anybody who's willing to pay the price and go through the orders of qualifying and passing the bar exam, etc. It's a very, very rewarding career because you get to help people and do a world of good and get paid in the process. Thanks for listening. Come back next week for another episode of Uncommon Law, lessons they don't teach in law school. I'm Judge Rudy Greco. Court is adjourned.